All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time we're tackling a real head-scratcher, the lost colony of Roanoke.
Yeah, this one's a classic mystery.
I mean, everybody knows the basic story, right?
English settlers, late 1500s,
Moof! Gone. Vanished.
just a few weird clues left behind.
But we're gonna dig a little deeper.
Absolutely.
We've got first-hand accounts, we've got historical records.
Oh, and even some recent archaeological finds we can talk about.
So are you ready to put on your detective hat and try to figure this thing out?
Let's crack this case. This is one of those events that, it just sticks with you, even after all these centuries.
It really is. And, it wasn't just some random group that disappeared. This
Yeah.
was England's, a big attempt
Yeah.
to finally get a solid foothold in the Americas. They were really going for it.
Huge ambitions, new lands, resources, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, and when they vanished, it wasn't just a tragedy, it was a major setback.
Oh, absolutely. England was in shock and future colonization efforts.
Yeah,
Well, they definitely got a lot more cautious after that.
it cast a shadow, for sure.
Big time.
To really grasp how big of a deal this was, we need to rewind back to 1587.
Okay, picture this. 115 men, women, children,
Wow.
led by John White, landing on Roanoke Island, a totally alien place.
Completely foreign to them, everything new, different.
And they were carrying so much. The hopes of a fresh start,
A new life.
but also the sheer weight of surviving in a completely unfamiliar, often hostile environment.
I can't even imagine, just trying to wrap my head around what that must have been like for them.
Definitely not a walk in the park.
Not at all. And remember, these weren't seasoned explorers.
Right,
but
we're talking families, blacksmiths, farmers,
ordinary people.
even children born during the journey over.
Wow.
John White himself. He left his own daughter and granddaughter on Roanoke.
It's hard to fathom making that decision.
I know, right? And his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, she was the first English child born in the New World.
That's a huge part of history. And those family ties, it makes this mystery even more heartbreaking.
Absolutely. Now, White, he was facing a dwindling supply,
Oh yeah, things were getting tough.
challenges piling up. So he made the difficult choice to sail back to England for reinforcements.
Leaving everyone behind to hold down the fort, so to speak.
Yeah, but he probably never imagined it would be 3 years before he could get back.
3 years. Wow. Can you imagine the colonists just waiting, wondering, hoping?
And White dealing with delays, wars, storms, knowing his family was out there, but not knowing their fate.
It's just agonizing.
On both sides.
And then, after all that, the crushing reality, White finally makes it back in 1590,
3 years later,
only to find nothing.
a ghost town.
The colony, completely deserted. Just imagine that feeling. Stepping ashore, expecting to see familiar faces, but instead,
Empty houses,
abandoned belongings.
over 100 people, gone.
Vanished.
And no trace, except for one thing. One word, actually.
Croatoan, carved onto a post. Chills, right?
It really does feel like something straight out of a mystery novel.
One word, a whisper from the past.
That single word has become the biggest puzzle piece in this whole mystery.
Like a cryptic code to crack.
It's a clue,
Yeah.
but also a source of endless debate.
Does it point to Croatoan Island, where a Native American tribe of the same name lived?
Maybe.
Or is there something darker going on, something we haven't figured out yet?
It really gets you thinking, doesn't it?
Yeah, okay. Before we jump into all the theories, let's rewind a bit. We know these colonists were facing some serious hardships.
Yeah.
You mentioned the dwindling supplies, but their journals also tell a story of brutal winters,
Right.
struggles to grow enough food,
It was a constant battle.
and relationships with the local Native American tribes.
Not always smooth sailing, to say the least.
So not a picnic in the park, to say the least?
Not at all. Life on Roanoke was a fight for survival every single day.
Yeah, it puts things in perspective.
It really does. And John White himself, he even documented conflicts with the Second tribe.
A powerful group, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. They saw the English settlement as a threat, and understandably so.
And the Croatoan tribe, they were more welcoming, but
But joining them would have meant giving up their English identity, their whole way of life.
that's a tough choice, even in a desperate situation.
Huge decision.
So we've got this mix of internal struggles, external threats,
Right.
and the constant pressure of surviving in a wilderness they barely understood.
A recipe for disaster, almost.
With all that in mind, let's dive into the big question. What happened to them?
The $1 million question, right?
Let's break down the main theories about the fate of the lost colonists.
Time to put on those detective hats. We'll examine each theory, weigh the evidence, and see if we can piece together a plausible explanation for this enduring mystery. All right, well, let's kick things off with probably the most popular theory.
Yeah, the Croatoan Island theory.
Exactly. It's the most straightforward interpretation of that word carved on the post.
Makes sense.
Remember, the Croatoan tribe, they had been somewhat friendly to the English
Yeah.
and the island itself.
What about it?
Better for farming, better for fishing.
Ah, so a logical place to go if things were going south at Roanoke.
Right, like if they felt threatened, abandoned.
They'd look for allies, make a move, a gamble, but maybe their best shot.
Exactly. And there is some historical backing for this. John White himself, he thought this was the most likely scenario.
He did.
He wrote in his journal that he told the colonists, hey, if you got to relocate, carve the name of the place on a post.
Smart. But wouldn't there be more evidence if they'd actually joined the Croatoan tribe?
You'd think so.
Yeah.
Like you'd expect some English customs or artifact to have been absorbed into the tribe's culture.
Right, exactly.
For centuries, there was very little to support that. Then, late 20th century, things got interesting.
Ooh, what happened?
Archaeologists started finding stuff on Hatteras Island.
Hatteras Island.
Yeah, it's part of the Outer Banks, close to Roanoke. And the stuff they found, European-style pottery, weapons, all dating back to the 16th century.
Hold on, so we're talking objects from the Roanoke era on the very island they might have gone to?
Bingo.
That's got to be huge for the Croatoan theory.
It was a big deal, definitely brought the theory back into the spotlight, but it's not a slam dunk.
How so?
Some folks argue that the artifacts could have been traded goods, not proof of actual settlers living there.
I see. So just because they had the stuff doesn't mean they lived there permanently.
Exactly. And there's another issue.
Yeah.
No clear signs of a full-blown English settlement on Hatteras.
Huh. So the Croatoan theory is promising, but there are still some holes.
Yeah, some loose ends.
What about other explanations for the colony's disappearance? What else is on the table?
Well, there's the idea that they tried to sail back to England.
Whoa, really? Across the Atlantic?
Desperate times, desperate measures, right? Maybe they were running low on supplies, facing conflict, and thought, hey, let's risk it all and try to get back home.
That's a bold move, but also insanely dangerous.
Oh, absolutely, especially with families on board, limited resources. And we have zero records of any ships from that time showing up in England with a bunch of Roanoke colonists.
Yeah, that would have been big news.
For sure. So this theory, it's more about grasping at straws than hard evidence.
A last resort, but not super likely.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about, did they just die out in the wilderness?
That's a possibility too.
Disease, starvation, attacks.
Life on Roanoke, it was brutal. Disease was running rampant in the New World back then. Their crops might have failed.
Tough conditions all around.
Plus, there's the Secondton tribe, remember? Things could have escalated.
Leading to...
Yeah.
It's not a pleasant thought, but it's possible.
It fits with what we know about how hard things were. But wouldn't there be some evidence? Bones, graves, something?
You'd think so, right? But nothing. No mass graves, no signs of a massacre. Now, disease could explain the lack of bodies, but what about all their stuff? Yeah, good point.
And the Croatoan message that was carved deliberately. It wasn't a random act.
So that throws a wrench in the died in the wilderness theory.
Kinda, yeah.
Okay, so we've got relocation, a risky voyage back to England, and perishing in the wilderness. All possible, but none with a perfect fit.
That's a thing with this mystery.
What is?
There are more theories out there. Some are a little out there.
Like what? Give me an example.
Some folks think the colonists were absorbed by another Native American tribe further inland,
Interesting.
maybe looking for better land or escaping conflict. And then there are even theories about Spanish interference.
Wait, the Spanish?
Remember, England and Spain weren't exactly buddies back then.
True, true. But wouldn't it be tough to prove those theories without some solid evidence?
Yeah, these are more speculative.
Intriguing, but not a lot to go on, so it seems like we're left with a lot of maybes and a mystery that might never be completely solved.
That's history for you, right?
What do you mean?
We can gather clues, analyze the pieces, but sometimes that full picture, it stays hidden.
Lost to time.
But that doesn't mean we stop looking for answers.
Exactly. And speaking of looking, you mentioned earlier that new archaeological discoveries have been changing our understanding of the Roanoke story.
Oh, yeah, there's been some exciting stuff.
So let's talk about those. What have they found, and what can it tell us about these lost colonists? It really is amazing to think, after all this time, we're still finding stuff, you know?
It is. Archaeology is like, it's our time machine, right?
I love
We
that.
can go beyond the history books, all the stories, and see what's actually there.
So what kind of things are we talking about?
I mean, you mentioned pottery before, but what else?
Yeah, like have they found things that can give us a glimpse into, how they lived, how they interacted with the Native Americans?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There have been some incredible discoveries. For example, on Roanoke Island itself, they found a small copper ring, probably belonged to a child. A little reminder that this wasn't just a bunch of, adventurers or whatever.
Yeah.
Families, kids running around.
The whole community.
Exactly.
It's crazy to think, like, a child was wearing that ring, like, over 400 years ago.
Right. It just brings it all home, makes it real.
What else?
Well, they've also found remnants of workshops, indicating that they were practicing skilled trades. And maybe most interesting, they're finding European-style ceramics right alongside Native American pottery, often in the same areas.
Wow, so not just living near each other.
More like living together, maybe?
Cooperation, exchange.
It definitely adds another layer to the story. Maybe things weren't just about conflict,
Maybe they were trading, forming alliances.
Who knows? Maybe even becoming friends.
It challenges the whole, traditional story of colonists versus Native Americans.
Definitely more nuanced than we used to think.
It makes you wonder if the whole lost part, maybe it wasn't so much about vanishing, but more about blending in.
Adapting. Yeah, it's a fascinating possibility.
And it opens up even more questions, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Like, was it voluntary? Or were they forced to adapt?
To survive, yeah.
Did they hold on to their English identity? Or did they become part of Native American life?
So many questions.
And the archaeologists are working to figure those out right now.
It's amazing how every new discovery seems to make the mystery even deeper.
It's like the more we find out.
The less we know.
In a way, yeah. But with all the excavations going on, the new technologies, it feels like we're getting closer to the truth.
The story's not over yet.
Not by a long shot.
And it's pretty amazing how much power this mystery still has.
I know, right?
It's like centuries later and we're still hooked.
Books, movies, you name it.
All inspired by this one event.
It really makes you think about early American history in a whole new way.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I gotta say, I feel like we've only just begun to explore this,
Oh, for sure.
We talked about the history, the different theories, the archaeology.
A lot to unpack.
But that one big question, still unanswered. What happened to them?
Maybe there isn't one answer.
Maybe it's a mix of everything, relocation, assimilation, the hardships.
Perfect storm.
But, that search for answers, that drive to understand our past,
Yeah,
that's what keeps this story alive.
totally. It's a reminder that history isn't just a bunch of dates in a textbook. It's about real people.
Their lives, their dreams.
Yeah, and sometimes, they're mysteries.
So to everyone listening, we encourage you to keep digging, keep asking those questions. Who knows, maybe someday the lost colonists of Roanoke will finally reveal their secrets. Thanks for joining us.